All right, I had a wedding in Baldwin, Kansas late yesterday. When I got home, it was the top of the ninth inning. I turned on the TV set. I believe it was 4-4 at that time. My wife comes in. She's my wisdom person. My wife came in and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm watching the game." And she said, "How many innings have you seen so far?" And I said, "None." And she said, "Do you think it's a good idea that you should be watching now?" And I thought, not being superstitious or anything, I thought, well, maybe not. So I switched to another channel, and then, it was top of the ninth, and I thought, well, I'll just keep checking back, see if the game's over yet. So I just kept checking back. The game wasn't over yet, and I had to flip it back real fast before she'd notice. Way to go, Royals. Way to go, Royals. So I'm not going to watch tomorrow night either. So I was reading in this book of Eric Butterworth's, and I got to, this is the book we're using for our Fall Faith series, Spiritual Economics. If you don't have a copy, I really recommend you get one. It's a very, very powerful book. And I was reading the chapter on visualization a while ago, and it's the chapter for this week's study. And in this chapter on visualization, Eric says, treasure mapping is a gross materialization of a beautiful spiritual law. Now, don't walk out. A gross materialization on a beautiful spiritual law. And I said, "Eric, what are you doing? Why would you include something like that in this book?" Remember last week, if you were here last week, we talked about how we're going to really shake things up, that we're going to look at teachings from a totally different perspective. And, Eric really was taking on the sacred cow with this one. So, if you weren't here last week and you want to catch up, all of our lessons are online. You can listen to it audio or you can watch the video. But going back to last week, there's a couple things that we shared. We talked about the importance of moving beyond where we're at today. We talked about getting rid of those old things in our life that no longer serve us. We talked about cleaning out our thoughts, cleaning out our feelings. We talked about wearing sport coats that no longer fit us after 20 years, and how to go into our closets and clean out those things that are too confining and too restricting. We said there's a whole new way of thinking that we want to adopt, a whole new way of believing, a whole new way of living. And then we talked about God, and we talked about the nature of God. And we said, God is not this being out in space with the attributes of love, peace, and harmony and wisdom, but that God is love, peace, harmony, wisdom, that God is the source of our good. There were two concepts that we introduced last week that I'm going to hold on to throughout the entire series. The one is, it's bigger than that. Just the concept, it's bigger than that. And you're going to hear me say that again and again and again, because we're really trying to move to a new level of understanding of what abundance is all about what spiritual well-being is all about. And to do that, we need to take where we're at today, and we need to say, it's bigger than that. It's really bigger than that. And then also we need to look at all the noise in our life. The other concept we talked about was this noise, any thoughts of lack or limitation that we're experiencing, any of the political ads that we're watching, just, any of these things that are going on, the noise, and to listen deeply into the silence behind the noise. Many years ago, I believe it must have been in the early 70s. For those of you who weren't around, who weren't born yet, in the early 70s there was a gas shortage. Some of you will remember that. We had a gas shortage. And I don't know, I was up in Seattle at that time, but long lines of cars waiting to get gas. Sometimes miles long, just waiting to get to the fuel pump. And if you can imagine, people were absolutely irate because the price of gas skyrocketed. It went to 29 cents a gallon. And we were so upset at that time. 29 cents a gallon, I've got to wait in line to get gas. And if that wasn't bad enough, an announcement was made that there was a toilet paper shortage. And sure enough, the next day, if you went out about noon to the stores, all the shelves were empty of toilet paper. People were upset. The problem was, there was no toilet paper shortage. Well, there was for a very brief period of time. You see, what happened is Johnny Carson the night before was doing his monologue about the gas shortage, and he started talking about a toilet paper shortage. And people in a fear of lack went out and bought all of the toilet paper that they could possibly accommodate in their house. And I bet some of them are still using it. You know, great fear spread throughout this land of ours. It's absolutely amazing what fear will do, whether there's something to be fearful about or not. It's all related to this thing that we call consciousness. It's a word that we use in Unity all the time, and it's sort of our personal vocabulary consciousness, but we don't define it very often. Eric Butterworth in the book Spiritual Economics defines it as thoughts. I think it's bigger than that. I really do. I think our consciousness is the sum total of all of our thoughts, our feelings, and the way we are living our lives. And that's our consciousness. And the world we attract to us is based on our thoughts, our feelings, and the way we are living our lives. You know, it's about the things we fear in life and the things we don't. It's about the things that we have faith in our lives and the things we don't. It's like a rheostat. A consciousness is like a rheostat. You know what a rheostat is? Almost every one of you has a rheostat in your home, whether you recognize it or not. A rheostat is the dimmer switch that you have maybe in your dining room. Yeah. And Jan, would you just hit our dimmer switch? What happens is, when you turn the rheostat up, when you turn the dimmer switch up, resistance starts stopping the electricity from flowing through to the lights. And the higher you turn the rheostat, the less light that shines in your house. Now, this is very symbolic. Would you go ahead and turn the lights back up, Jan? It's very symbolic. The more resistance we have, the more fear that we have, the more we focus on lack and limitation in our life, the higher the rheostat goes on, and the less light, God light, we experience in our lives. You know, when we're in faith, we have much less resistance. And Jesus said, you know how much faith he said we needed to have? He said we needed to have this much faith. If we just had this much faith, then we can say to the mountains, move, and they're going to move from one place to the other. If we had this much faith, we could look at the noise in our life, and we could go to that silence behind the noise. Many of you were here for Terry Wilder's concert last week. If you're here, wasn't it amazing? Absolutely one of the most amazing things you've ever heard. If you weren't here, she was going to do a gong meditation. Well, you know, I was thinking about that. How can you meditate when she's banging on a gong? And this gong, if you saw, was huge. It's absolutely huge. And she started playing the gong, and she hit on it a couple times, but then she started playing the harmonics. And this great vibrational energy just went out. Especially if you were over on this side, you could feel that vibration. And I was clear over here, I could feel it over there. And it moved me to a place of silence, even though with that music of the gong, it moved me to a place of silence that I had not experienced before. The silence behind all of the noise. During Fall Faith, we're going to ask you to move from a state of lack and limitation to a state, we're going to ask you to move boldly into a new state of living. We're going to ask you to deepen your understanding, to take the teachings on this new level, to transcend any human limitation that you might be experiencing right now. Last week we talked about taking the ordinary in our lives, moving it to the extraordinary. And this week I'm going to invite you to take the extraordinary that we're going to be experiencing and allowing that extraordinary to be the new ordinary. You see, once we move into this new state, this new understanding, miracles are no longer necessary. Because that new state, that which we figured was miraculous, is now the natural order of things for us. I remember many, many, many years ago reading, and I remember it was TV Guide magazine. And I opened it up and I read it, and they said, in TV guys, so it must be gospel, they said that the electronic community was creating a device that we could attach to our television sets, and it would actually record the programs. So we wouldn't have to watch it at that time. And they said, you know, they're calling it, well, they had Betamax and VHS, and I thought, well, that's a miracle. That's not going to really happen. They're never going to be able to do that. Look what we have nowadays with our DVRs, and we can record 8 programs at the same time. I was thinking about computers, and when we were first introduced to computers, I had the first computer out at Unity Village. They thought it was a fad, and they just wanted to give it to me and see if they ever wanted to get any more. And they had this old DOS operating system, and I said, you know, this thing is amazing. Now technology has reached its ultimate peak. Yeah, look at computers today. If we would have had these back then, we would have thought them miraculous. Today we think nothing about the tablets and our phones. Our phones are more powerful than most computers. It's about raising our consciousness to a new level, a new order, and to a new normal. So how do we do this? I want to go back to a couple things that Jesus said. You think Eric Butterworth rocked the boat. You think he rocked the teachings. Think about what Jesus told us. He said, to those of you who have, more is going to be given. To those of you who have not, even that which you have is going to be taken away from you. Now that's rather mean. I mean, think about it. Was he saying that the rich are going to get richer and the poor are going to get poorer? Well, not if you put it into the context of what he was talking about, and we don't have time to get into the parable today. It's called the parable of the talents. What he was saying was those who have faith, those who have more faith, are going to be attracting more and more good to them. Those who are living in a state of fear are going to be losing precious pieces of their lives. So we need to move into a new understanding of life. So what's wrong with treasure mapping? Treasure mapping is taking pictures of those things that you want to manifest in your life, the new car, the new house, the new relationship, and putting it on a board and keeping that board in front of you and just visualizing it every single day and allowing these things to come forth into your existence. And yet Eric Butterworth says it's a gross materialization of a beautiful spiritual law. And I really get what he's saying. Now, we don't have a treasure map at home as such, but on our refrigerator we do have Gold Card. And it's nothing more than a treasure map, just in writing. And these things have been manifesting in our lives. Treasure mapping works. But he was saying, we live in a culture right now of give me, give me, give me, give me. And give it to me now. I want it right now. And he said, we've got to move beyond that culture of get, 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 get. Because spiritual unfoldment, spiritual growth is about giving, 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 giving. See, life is bigger than just receiving. Treasure mapping does work. Treasure mapping does work. We have manifested many things. Remember the house? Remember the first house we lived in at Unity Village? Yeah. Yeah. We've got to move into a state of giving. So Jesus made another very interesting statement. He said, give and it'll be given to you. Pressed down, heaped up, overflowing into your life. He said our consciousness should be on giving. And a secondary benefit is as you give, you're going to receive, but it's going to be heaped up, pressed down, and overflowing in your life. By the same measure you give, the same measure you're going to receive. Well, I didn't understand that until I started going to the Lego store. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the Lego store. It's just the most amazing thing. They've got one right up here, just at Oak Park Mall, if you've got kids, grandkids. You go in, and there's kits of Lego stuff over on this side. There's helicopters and boats and houses and buildings, and there's kits over on this side for every age group. Just tons and tons and tons of kits. But the amazing part is, if you go to the back wall of the Lego store, or Legoland, the back wall is full of these containers, and each container has a different Lego brick in it. And you can purchase one of these cups, and you fill it. You just take your handful and just fill the cup with Legos, and then they check you out. And so I've been doing that for a while with my grandson. And we go in, and we take our cup, and we take handfuls of this stuff, and we fill it up. You go and check out. And then I started watching the people who really understood Legos. And they took the same size cup, the same measure, and they got about a third more Legos in it than I did. And so I watched them very carefully. And what they were doing, they were taking these little bricks. Legos are little bricks. And they were taking a great deal of time, and they would sit there and they put these things together really tight. And then they start putting them in the container, pressed together. Then they would take some smaller Lego items and sort of spread it around and shake them up. Shaken up and pressed together. And then something I didn't realize, when we filled up our Lego cup, we filled it to the top. Well, I didn't realize you could have it overflowing. And what they'll do is they'll put the top on and they'll tape it down. So by the same measure that I had, when you press it together, shake it up, overflowing, you can get much more good into your life. So Jesus must have had a Lego store near him. Give and it'll be given to you. Heaped up, pressed down, and overflowing into your life. We're starting a new program here. We've been promoting it for a while now. You've seen the Coming Soon and the T3 logo up on the screen. You've been seeing people wearing the T3 pin. This is a program about moving forward in faith, and it is called the T3 program. It's about moving from the ordinary to the extraordinary and then allowing the extraordinary to be the new ordinary in your life. It's about moving from lack to abundance, from receiving to giving. It's a program about making new commitments, about commitments to a whole new way of living. It's a program like these new members have done, committing to their spiritual growth and unfoldment. You see, we've got to move into a consciousness of giving if we're going to grow spiritually. The first T that we talk about in the T3 program is time. It's giving of your time in sacred service. Eric Butterworth says, if there is lack, if there is any limitation in your life, and he gives a really powerful 4-word statement. If there is lack, if there is limitation in your life, something has to give. Something has to give. I would just say to you, if you're experiencing anything in your life that's not of God, anything that's not the way you want it to be, remember those words. Something has to give. You've got to move to a new level of understanding. It's bigger than what you've been experiencing in your life. He says, go down to the church or some other nonprofit organization and volunteer your services, giving your services to some community activity. The first T, if you really want to move forward with your spiritual growth and unfoldment, you give some of your time in service, And if you know, I know there's people out there who are saying, well, Bob, you just want more volunteers here at the church, and so that's why you're plugging this. Absolutely we do. It takes over 200 volunteers to do everything that we do, and we're always looking for more volunteers. We're going to have Rachel come up in a few minutes, and she's going to share with you some volunteer opportunities that we have available with you. But it's bigger than that. It's bigger than just volunteering here in the church. It's just volunteering out in the community too. One of the things we heard from you came to us and you said, we want more outreach. More outreach means going out into the community and being in service. My wife, who's sitting here, volunteers. Doesn't volunteer here at the church, but she volunteers for 2 other organizations. She volunteers for a cancer group. She volunteers for a school. She is taking her time and being in sacred service. And we need to do that too. Each and every one of us need to do that if we are going to move forward in our spiritual growth and unfoldment. You know, when I think of volunteers, I think of our song leaders. And I was reminded that Holly Sharp has twins too. So I don't know, be a song leader and have twins. Or not. I think of all of our prayer chaplains who have committed their time and their energy to holding this ministry and holding you in prayer. I think of Ellis McGee. You know, Ellis was here. We had our men's group who went out and they got this curbing back up, saving us about $13,000. And I looked out this week and I saw there was Ellis with his red truck taking concrete curbing and putting it out there in place, volunteering his time. I think of the ushers and the greeters who are here every Sunday who are volunteering of their time in sacred service. They're doing it for their spiritual growth. They're doing it for the church. They're doing it for the church. I think perhaps it was best said by one of our congregants. I have this bookmark that I keep under glass on my desk. And Stephanie Barton wrote this. And it really talks about being in service. She says, "We are each one a feather, masterfully created, tenderly placed on the wings of love. Together, we take flight. Together, we take flight." So we come together in sacred service, and we take flight. As we move through these upcoming weeks, we're going to talk some more about the T3 program. We'll talk about the pins that we have. I invite you back next week. You know, last week I was able to use the word hell and sin during the talk. I can't do it this week, but I did use them last week. And this next week, the title of the talk is Giving Thanks in the Crap. Now, I was told I can't use that word either. So, giving thanks in the stuff of life. So, come back next week as we look at how to take our spiritual journey to a deeper and deeper level. God bless you all.